Welcome back to TinyTalk. Today we have an exciting speaker, someone I'm thrilled to introduce. His name is Justin D'Angelo. He is the owner and founder of Printera, and we're going to talk about 3D concrete printing. Justin, thank you for joining us today. I'm so thrilled that you're here with us. We talk about you all the time. Today, we want to learn everything about what you have going on, how this all got started, and what new projects we're working on either together or on your own. Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to start Printera and get to where you are now.
Sure. Well, thanks, Brian, for having me. And, it's always good to hang out with you and the guys at Miniopolis. So first of all, it's good to be here. I love talking about 3D printing, so we could go as long as you want. I can get into the weeds as you want, or we can keep it high level. But yeah, so to get into my background and kind of like what the story of Printera is, basically, I started the business around about 5 years ago. I saw an article come through my inbox about a company that was 3D printing a house. And I've always just been a 3D printing enthusiast. So like just think like plastic printers, tinkers and toys and stuff, right? But I'm also pretty handy and I like to do stuff around my own house. So that got my curiosity going. And I actually called that company up and said, hey, I see what you're doing. I'm really interested. Would you be willing to let me come and check it out? And they were gracious enough to invite me to the site. And I went one day, I took off of work and I observed their print. And I came out of that saying, wow, this is going to change the face of construction. How can I get involved in this, right? How can I start something leveraging the same technology, but with the understanding that I'm not a general contractor, right? So I'm not licensed, but I said, maybe there's a market that is appropriate for the same technology, but in a non-permitted application sense. So I immediately started thinking like, oh yeah, landscape features, maybe outdoor kitchens, right? I was looking at like Paradise Grills and going, these guys are selling a $15,000 outdoor kitchen and it's made of, cheap metal and like some type of like synthetic blast on stucco. And I was like, we could produce a higher quality product than that and something really cool. Right. And Paradise Grills is like, they're crazy, right? I mean, they've got like 300 showrooms and this big factory. So I was like, they've proven the market. So that's where I actually started the company from. And I started it was called Printed Patio at the time. Because I really wanted to
remember when I walked through your warehouse, you had that old style robot, so a 3D printer, was it a gantry system or something like that?
When I started with it was it was a little like SCARA robot. So even before we had the warehouse and before you met me the first time, so I bootstrapped and purchased this SCARA robot. It could print 6 feet tall and 6 feet wide, and I was actually running out of my parents' garage in Palm City, just like toying with concrete and trying to figure out whether or not this was like a viable business concept. And so I was doing that nights and weekends, right, as a side hustle. And it was around the time, I want to say 6 to 8 months from getting that printer up and running, that I finally felt like I had a product. I printed what I called my outdoor living showcase. And it was, some tables and a bar and some chairs. And I took a bunch of really nice pictures and I said, all right, I've got a product. And I went and I raised $410K on a safe. And that was what I took to convert that startup concept into what is now the business of Printera. We got a commercial grade printer now, right? We moved from the garage into a dedicated manufacturing facility, 3,500 square feet. And we just went to work doing all kinds of stuff. And somewhere along the way, I'm in very small company in terms of offering 3D printing in the country. So Justin Scheinberg found me because he's always liked to toy around with robots and 3D printing. And he's like, hey, I see you have this printer. I'd love to work with you. And he had some projects in mind. And, he brought the architecture background, right? So where I said I never imagined doing houses, even though that's what got me into it. Suddenly with his participation, we had the capability, right? He could do a full plan, designed with his education and master's in architecture. And then he also has a master's in robotic fabrication and architecture. So he really brought an element to my company that I didn't have. And fast forward now, and we've got some really cool projects under our belt, like some world firsts and some national stuff. And it's a cool position to be in as a startup. But I am chomping at the bit and so excited to do a tiny home with you guys. Like it's gonna be awesome.
So let's talk about where are you exactly? Because we have a lot of either buyers or investors saying, man, this is such a neat concept. Where's your manufacturer based at? So tell us a little bit more about where you are, and maybe we can start diving into what concept is helping you differentiate yourself from what other people are doing in the industry, and how that's beneficial to Florida's extreme climates. You know, we got hurricanes and heat, and people love concrete. So let's dive into that part.
So we're physically located in Stewart, so that's just north of West Palm Beach. Or another way to look at it is it's about equidistant between Orlando and Miami, so it's good to be able to service all those markets. But what we're seeing is with our method, we can pretty much service all of Florida. And for other types of,
if I'm not mistaken, it's not that you're targeting it right now, but you can go beyond that. There's
and so one of the big projects that we delivered out was the first 3D printed project in Manhattan, and I'll talk about that in a second because I think it was really cool. But so for landscape and kind of architectural features, we can certainly ship countrywide. But as far as working on kind of the larger elements, you're talking about whole home fabrication, I think it's going to make sense to be Florida focused, maybe the Southeast. But together, you and I, Brian, will figure out what the range of our offerings really going to be. And to be able to kind of lean into what our differentiator is and how we operate as a factory as opposed to an on-site printer, it kind of leans into not only our special sauce, but what we think are some real advantages that we're going to bring to the end consumer as well as you, the general contractor. So I'll just start with, when you think about 3D printing in concrete, just to level set for people that may be not familiar with 3D printing in construction right now, because the whole industry is novel, right? If you're going to 3D print a house, the vast majority of companies that are doing so today are bringing a large gantry robot to the construction site, and they are printing directly to slab. So that carries with it some advantages, but in our experience, more disadvantages than advantages. So
especially in Florida, right, with the heat, the water, humidity.
Exactly. So we could start with that, right? Like, even on a perfect day in Florida, your conditions aren't the same in the morning as they are in the afternoon, right? If you had the best day that you could ask for, your temperature is going to be different in the morning when you're starting up. Your humidity is going to be different. And that has a real impact on the actual visual of the 3D print. And our philosophy in 3D printing modules, kind of like my virtual background, if anybody's watching this, is showing that what we're really honing in on is the quality of the finish, the layer quality, whether it's a pattern or straight lines. And we want to have this elevated quality so that we can offer a completed product. So circling that right back around to the benefit to the end consumer or even the GC is if we can deliver a wall panel that doesn't require any subsequent finishing, right? If you can eliminate stucco from the process, eliminate interior drywall, those are extra processes that you're straight up saving money and you're saving time. But I guess I kind of jumped the gun, right? Because I didn't really say what we're doing differently, right? So I talked about the fact that a normal printer today is going to assemble a giant gantry on the construction site. They're going to have to wait until the slab is cured. Aggressively, maybe they could be in at the 7-day cure period. And then they're going to start printing the structure, right? And depending on the size of the structure, they're looking at, if everything goes flawlessly, maybe a week. So with our method, what we're essentially doing is saying, we're not going to fight the elements. We're going to print wall panels in 8 to 10 foot segments in our warehouse, where they then will be transported to site and assembled in large elements, right? So as a GC, instead of ordering say 6,000 CMU blocks, you're ordering 20 wall panels, and they go together and they make up the house. So that allows us to elevate the quality, as I mentioned before, right? We're not fighting the environment, so you're also not contending with weather delays and all the issues that you run into with trying to operate a piece of industrial equipment on a construction site.
Right.
And you're assembling the house much faster, because something in the footprint of what you're talking about, like your tiny home model, to say the 750, we anticipate that when you start moving with that each one of those should go together in a day, right? Like for the wall panel placement, you still have to come around and fill your fill cells and bond beam and everything. But you compare the day of that versus however long it's going to take your block layers to line up and configure all the rooms. We think that this is bringing a real advantage to the construction site. And the other thing about it is we can parallel process that. So Brian, you cleared your permit. You and your guys are working on, site grading and excavation and pouring the footers and the foundations, right? You're doing all the work ready to get ready for these walls. We are already printing the walls. So in the comparison, right, where you have to bring a gantry site, they're starting to print by the time we are already done delivering and putting the walls together on site, because it's going to take them a day or two to get the printer lined up and ready to go. So there's other reasons I can touch on, but I think like those are like the super high level highlights. And it's a very novel approach. In the country, there are 14 companies that are 3D printing with concrete. The only other one that's printing in the way that we're doing is a company out of Detroit, and they're actually a nonprofit. So they're just kind of proving the concept. So it's kind of a unique approach on the market. And then what we're adding to that on top of it is the fidelity, because we can print with a layer quality that is pretty much unseen. And
I think to add to what you're saying, for people out there that don't necessarily understand construction, I've exposed myself to really understanding the prefabricated part of construction. The reason I'm such a big advocate for it, 3D concrete printing is definitely on top of the list, is because not only is Florida demanding that quality of a structure, because, concrete has stood the test of time in Florida, but in addition to that, the simplicity of allowing us to speed through construction, which is a huge thing, especially with the demands for housing, specifically affordable housing, and the reduction of skilled labor. That's huge. That's something that a lot of people aren't necessarily understanding or paying attention to. You start to wonder why construction costs are going up significantly, and the main reason is skilled labor. It's hard to find these guys, these block layers, like you mentioned earlier. They'll either recruit them from out of the country, right, which is no good. And the ones that are here, the ones that are experts, they know their value. They understand that they can charge a lot more because there's a lot less of them. So the future of that is not good. So the alternative is prefabrication. And in the 3D concrete printing aspect of it all, it solves multiple problems. Like you mentioned earlier, you're reducing cost, whether it's not necessarily having to stucco the interior or drywall finish, the exterior, or drywall finish the interior. That alone has some cost savings. The fact that we don't need as many guys, a telehandler, and maybe a group of 4 people to build our small footprint homes in one day, that's enough. That's enough to take care of a job that will in turn translate to cost savings, right? So I'm absolutely obsessed. For those out there that don't understand construction and prefabrication, what Printera and his team, which by the way, I love all of you guys. You guys are all an incredible mesh of team. You've got that finesse in business, which I admire and I look up to. Justin, he's a wizard, man. He's a wizard behind that.
He certainly is.
And he's incredible. Alex and the other 2 guys that haven't built a relationship with it. I love all of you guys. I admire you guys. I look up to you. I'm so excited about your future. But what you guys are doing is solving such a big problem, not only in construction in general, but specifically what we're advocating for in small footprint homes.
Yeah. As excited as you are about it, we are too, right? We're excited about the partnership to continue to work together on stuff. And I think, let's build tons and tons of houses right all over Florida. I think there's such an awesome opportunity. And you start
and to touch on the whole concept thing. You said, we're a novel concept. A lot of people get fearful. Well, I don't want to be the test run here. I don't want to be the guinea pig.
Yeah.
What can you say to those people to help provide peace of mind? And it's we're not reinventing the wheel. We just have a different approach.
Yep. So there's a couple considerations. So the first one being I'll point to that company in Detroit as an example of where it's been done before and how that house was standing up. But even more than that, there is a company out of New Zealand who's been doing it pretty extensively now for a few years in the same method that we are. And the quality of homes that they're putting together, their customer satisfaction, just the overall excitement that they're generating in their field, they're big inspirations for me, right? I've been kind of following them since the beginning as well. And so we know the concept is sound and proven, right? And they're also, by the way, in one of the most extreme environments for a separate reason, which is earthquakes. So not only are they doing things in the same overall fashion that we are, but they're actually contending with what's in many cases a concrete structure worst nightmare, right? Which is tectonic movement. So if I had the choice of what environment I'm going to build in, I'm going to build in a hurricane environment rather than an earthquake one. But okay,
they've proven themselves to be successful and to implement safe housing.
Exactly. Yeah. So that, I mean, that's one thing, right? You can always point to who has done it successfully as one proof of concept, but the other element is, at the end of the day, when we look at producing any house in Florida, whether it's 3D printed or not, right, it goes through a pretty scrutinous engineering review. So even the houses that we design, right, with the other Justin, he can take it from an architecture standpoint, but everything needs to go through engineering to be cleared. And as we print these wall modules, it's looked at the same way that a concrete block structure is looked at, and it's a post and beam construction. So for the end user thinking about what does that really mean in their house, it means every 4 to 6 feet, depending on the code requirement of your specific municipality, there's going to be a solid poured concrete beam or post, that comes from the slab, right? So you have rebar that's going to stick out of the slab that the wall modules are dropped over, and there'll be a fill cell around that rebar that gets poured solid with concrete, and that's your post. And then around the entire header of the structure, you also are laying rebar and pouring that to create the beam. So now you have a solid poured post and beam system, the same as any CMU block system. You just have fewer joint points, right? Where your block is 16 or 18 inches long, right? And you've got a grout point between each one of them. Whereas in our structure, your grout point is only between each mega wall panel, right? So it overall is going to produce a stronger structure. And then the other element of it, even outside of engineering, is the materials themselves, right? It's a superior material to concrete block. So concrete block, one way that they look at the strength is what's its compressive strength, and those come in at 2,000 psi, whereas our printed concrete is in at least 5,000 psi mix. So you're dealing with more than twice as strong, denser material, which makes it less water permeable, which is good news for the longevity of the structure too, because the worst enemy of concrete is corrosion, which comes from the rebar. So having a more dense material around it, that's going to work wonders for having a structure that's going to outlast the original buyer and hopefully their kids and their grandkids.
The power of 3D concrete printing. What's up, Dustin? All right, sorry. Continue. That was so good.
Yeah, no, but that's the reality, right? I mean, everybody wants a house that it's going to last, and then the other thing that we're talking about is the elements, right? It's specific to Florida because we started talking about hurricanes, but the reality of concrete printing is another thing that we can bring to it is the shape, right? If you look at just like regular wind load dynamics, right, or aerodynamics, we can create a structure that's rounded, and it doesn't cost a premium from a print standpoint because the robot doesn't care if it's straight walls or rounded walls. And obviously that look can be really unique or jarring depending on what your artistic taste is. But even for simple structures, right, where it's more traditional look, it could be as simple as taking the corners and putting them on a 2-foot filleted edge, right, a 2-foot radius. And now you have your normal look of a house, right, with your straight walls that you're used to, but instead of the wind load pushing up against it, it kind of wraps around the corners because the corners are rounded. So all of those
That's
things
one of
come
the
in together.
things that I love most about it is how creative you can get, and even taking it a step further, along with what you mentioned about the strength of these walls. A lot of people don't understand 2,000 psi, 6,000 psi. They don't understand what that means. Basically, it means a safer structure,
Yeah.
right? Summarize it.
Yeah.
But the creative aspect of this all is just mind blowing. I would love to dive in further now about the projects that you've done. If you can run through those, summarize them, and a few ideas that that you're entertaining right now, and how can people implement this 3D concrete printing technology and allow Miniopolis to help them assemble this in their homes for future uses. How creative can someone get, Justin?
Sure. So I'll start with some of the simplest and go to the most complex and interesting, right? So at the end of the day, right, you're printing, a 3D printer means that you have extreme flexibility. And the fact that we're not moving the printer around from site to site means that we can transition from one project to another very seamlessly. So we could be printing something as simple as planters, right? If you want a beautiful, long-lasting concrete planter in your garden, right? That's very easy for us to offer. Through to the outdoor kitchens that I mentioned earlier, right? So we just did a barbecue cladding that is kind of very organic looking. It like kind of grows out like mangrove roots, and you know, it's got the integration in it for the barbecue and the you know, the grill doors and the vents and everything. So as simple as stuff like that to getting into the larger scale, right? Our business right now is predominantly actually commercial applications. So whether that's columns for commercial structures that then get filled and become structural, or the New York City project
for parts.
All right, exactly. Yeah, parts for buildings. Yeah. So actually, so I'll step back. So I'll start with what one of the more interesting projects is. That when we first started, we printed an artificial reef for the Florida Oceanographic Society, and it was a great project for us because we built it and we donated it to try and build some publicity and you know, community acceptance of the technology. But it was a fantastic leverage of the technology, because when we approached them and said, hey, you know, we've got this ability to 3D print an artificial reef, they knew exactly what they wanted, because they have this turtle, Lily the loggerhead, that suffered a propeller strike. And so Lily is now positively buoyant, right? So Lily can't hold himself underwater for very long, right? He floats back up to the surface. So Oceanographic was like, hey, we want you to make a reef for us that, you know, has all the nooks and crannies and everything, but the overall shape is an arch. That way Lily can go under it and kind of sit under the arch and be held down by this artificial reef and be able to rest underwater, right? And that was like the coolest idea ever. And we printed it, and they put it in, you know, they actually put it in their lagoon. And within 2 hours of it going in, Lily was already all over it. It was probably the coolest experience that we've had, because like it was like instant gratification. And
meat chills over here, man.
Yeah, it was so cool. It was so cool.
That.
And Florida Oceanographic loved it so much too that they kept messaging me for like the next couple of weeks and months, and they're like, this is fantastic. Lily's on it all the time. The other turtles are finding it interesting. And then they went and they ordered 2 more modules. So you know, our act of charity and trying to, you know, get the word out there in a positive way yielded like a really immediate return and result, and it was just super cool because it has a real feel good factor, that project.
That's
so that's one, right? So that's one place that you see it. In the large landscape or architectural features, we just did New York City's first ever concrete 3D printed project. So that was a 60-foot long bench with these big integrated planters. And when I talk about the planter size, right, the openings are like 8 feet long for, you know, all kinds of foliage and vegetation to be put in. But it's right in the lobby of 25 Water Street in downtown Manhattan. So it's like a really high profile project. And the architect
for the most powerful city in our country,
right?
And feel like ecstatic about that accomplishment.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think we were together while all that was happening, and I remember how nervous you were about making sure that it would go through it. That's part of, the entrepreneurial spirit. It's like, hey, we're willing to do it. We're trying it out. We could fail. We could fail, but you did it. You succeeded. You put it in place, and now people are admiring it.
Yeah, and so that building, so we haven't even been able to capitalize on the marketing of that yet, because that building isn't going to open until the end of the year. But 25 Water, that's the old Chase Manhattan building. Like, it's a super high profile building. It's partially a hotel conversion, so it's going to have a lot of public access. And the way that project came to be is the architect there, basically, they designed something, right, that they were like, hey, how cool would it be to have this very organic sweeping element, right, that separates the ADA access ramp from some stair platforms. And they designed it, and then they asked, how are we going to fulfill it, right? And I think it was somebody on their team actually that said, well, maybe it's a candidate for being 3D printed. And that's how we got involved in the project. And we proved out in that scenario as well that 3D printing is a superior solution, because if they were to try and do this traditionally, they'd have to bring in very skilled concrete craftsmen to actually make this really intricate long mold. And then they would also be congesting that construction site, right, with a concrete truck and all the finishing work and everything that you need to do to pass that in place. Whereas for us, right, that 60-foot long bench module piece was done in 66 pieces, and they were able to take those in pallets, right? They stored them off to the side, and then when it was ready, the crew came in and put it together in a couple days, and that kept the overall construction site clear from all of those extra processes. So even outside of the time saving, right, when you're working in an environment like New York City, where there's a lot of cogs in place, right, to do a construction project of that scale, to be able to take one out and not have them interfering with the other tradespeople on site until it's necessary to put this thing together. We think there's going to be a lot of demand and interest in that, just from that standpoint.
And to add to that, in the general contractor's point of view, I look at it like a reduction in liability risk. You've got, for example, these concrete blocks that could fall on people, cut their arm, put them in a hospital bed. That's a nightmare for a general contractor. I'm sure something similar for this site that you were able to install these planters for. It's like getting people in and out as fast as possible has so many. You're basically solving so many problems. Like you said from the beginning, we could go on for days about this. I want to summarize really quick a few ideas on how someone can use the 3D concrete printing in their personal homes, let alone the commercial, which covered a few ideas. And some of them will include the planters you talked about, covering some ugly columns and making them beautiful with a unique design. Both lifts, the pilings, how that can be transformed into something artistic. What are some other ones that you can name off really quick so our audience can blow their own minds on how they can implement your technology?
Sure. So you mentioned the boat lift piling. So related to that, we can actually do a seawall cladding to turn your seawall into a habitat, which is really great for if you're into fishing or whatever, right? So you can do kind of tiles that attach to your seawall, and those are then the sacrificial element that takes the damage instead of your seawall and wake elements. So that's kind of cool. Moving into like kind of the more regular domain, right? We've seen demand for kitchen islands. We've seen demand for fountains, fire pits, actual concrete furnishings. So your chairs and tables, outdoor bars.
That example really quick, because I think that's a big one. Let's say you did a nice outdoor patio. It's got an outdoor bench, let's call it, furniture.
Yep.
You can have a beautiful concrete printed bench, right? But how would it make it comfortable? You're simply adding cushions on top of it, right? It's as simple as implementing that.
That's one way, and the fun thing too with the patterns that we can print, people are actually shocked at how comfortable the exposed concrete is when it's not a solid flat surface, right? There's something about it. I don't know. We have this bench that we bring to all the shows that we attend, and people are like, "Oh, can I sit on this thing?" And they sit down, and I love watching just the shock of everyone. Like, "Wow, this is so much more comfortable than I thought it was going to be," right? Because you think, "Oh yeah, I sit on this concrete thing," but absolutely, right? I mean, dress it up with cushions. You could upholster, right? We could even do the base of the bench, and then you could finish it with an alternative material, right? Like we've done kind of this mixed media stuff where you print the foundation of it with the concrete, and then the actual seating surface is wood or some other type of stone. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can dress it up and make it fun.
So I'm going to challenge everybody watching this, whether it's on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I want you to get as creative as possible and comment below on what you would want 3D printed. And hey, if you're willing to purchase it, we'll make it happen, right, Justin?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so some of those elements, right? Some of them need the assistance to get installed, right? If you're going to do an outdoor kitchen or a kitchen island, that's where you would definitely need to give Brian a call. They take the one downside, right, is that they take a special initiative to get into place, but once they're there, you don't have to worry about them, right? A hurricane's not taking away your concrete 3D printed bench or fire pit area, right, or your outdoor kitchen. Like, it's there to stay. So
you mean that the next hurricane, they don't have to worry about bringing in all their furniture? They can have their 3D concrete printed furniture in place?
Exactly. And what I tell people is if our 400-pound bench is flying through the air, then you've probably got a lot bigger problems than the fact that bench is flying. So.
That's a good point. Now, Justin, I'm going to wrap up with this. I know you've got some exciting news, some exciting things going on in Printera. I'm sure everybody watching here is ecstatic to see how they can be part of it. Tell us, what can our viewers do right now to be part of Printera's excitement, and what
Sure.
can happen?
So I appreciate the opportunity to plug, because basically, we're at a stage in our company now where we're looking to grow, and the very traditional track that companies would go down is they would seek venture capital investment, right? And we actually looked at some alternative methods, and we decided on a crowdfunding option. So we're now listed on Start Engine. So if you go to startengine.com and you search Printera, for the next couple of months, people can buy actual stock in our company. So the company will remain a private company, but with individuals owning it. And I really like that method, because I truly feel that the products that we're creating is to strengthen our society, right? And to bring creative solutions to everybody. And it just seemed fitting to me that everybody could own a piece of the company, right? Not some venture capital group or some conglomerate, right? Like, obviously we still retain a lot of the control of the company, but there's an opportunity for people to get in and be a part of our story. And hopefully people are as excited about it as I am, right? Because it is a cool solution. Exactly. So we just kicked it off. That campaign will be open for 3 months total. So basically you've got until, towards the end of November to grab a little piece of Printera. And again, you can go to startengine.com and just search Printera in the search bar. And then I guess, since we're doing little plugs, I can also just plug in, if you want to follow us on any of the socials like Instagram or TikTok or anything like that. We're always sharing kind of the projects that we're doing, so you can see how this technology is applied in a lot of different scenarios and cases. I know, Brian, as you and I work on this first tiny home, we're going to be doing a heck of a lot of social media together, right? Really covering how the whole thing goes. So yeah, I hope people jump in and follow along, and maybe even pick up a piece of Printera, because I'd love to have people on board.
Justin, thank you so much. We're cheering for you. I'm sure everybody out there watching is thrilled and want to hear more. We'll have to follow this up with some more content, but we're your #1 fans, and we're cheering for you. So good job. I'm proud of you guys. Keep on doing what you're doing, and let's build Tiny together.
Let's do it.